Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Chagigah Daf Yud Aleph, and we are starting 2/3 of the way down on Yud Amud Beis at the word Me'ilos. The Mishnah that we are focusing on, the quote that we're seeing from Me'ilos is from a Mishnah on Yud Amud Aleph, and there in the Mishnah had said that there are a number of ideas in Torah, a number of areas of halacha that a couple of different references. Porchin ba'avir was what we said about heter nadarim, is that they're floating in the air, and then the Gemara argued that. And then the next section of the Mishnah speaks about Shabbos, Chagigos, and Me'ilos, that they are kehararim hatzluyim ba'se'ara, that they're like mountains hanging by a thread, that they have mikra muat b'halachos merubos. So if there are mikra muat b'halachos merubos, that's the starting point for our discussions today. So 2/3 of the way down, Me'ilos was in the category of mikra muat. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Michtav ksivan, there's plenty of psukim that speak about Me'ilah. And Amar Rami Bar Chama, you're right. And by the way, just as fair warning, we're going to go through 5 different iterations of answers here as to what the chiddush is of Me'ilos. Because if we say that there's an area of halacha within Me'ilos that is not really referenced in Torah, that's what we're trying to find, because there are a lot of psukim. So what is our Mishnah referring to when it says that Me'ilos are like mountains that are being held by a thread? Which unique area of halacha? So Amar Rami Bar Chama lo nitzracha ela l'cheditnan, for the following Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Hashliach she'asa shlichuso ba'al habayis ma'al. Let's say that a shliach did his shlichus on behalf of a ba'al habayis, then the isser of Me'ilah is on the ba'al habayis. Me'ilah is when one misappropriates that which is kodesh, that which belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. And if they misappropriate those funds, they violate Me'ilah. What if I do so through a shaliach, through a messenger? So says the Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down, that the shaliach who does what he was asked to do, he's none the wiser. He just did what he was told to do. So the din is that it's on the Baal Habayis. However, lo asa shlichuso, shliach ma'al. Oh, this is unfair. If in fact the shliach doesn't fulfill what he was supposed to do, then he is the one who violates Me'ilah. So says the Gemara, V'chi asa shlichuso amai ma'al. I don't understand. Why is it that if in fact even he did the shlichus, that there should be any level of chiyuv? How could there ever be a case of we have a principle called ein shliach ledvar avera? No one should be chayiv in that case. The shliach should not be chayiv, and the baal habayis should not be chayiv. Ein shliach ledvar avera. So how could it ever be the case that is the halacha? And says the Gemara, this is in fact the din that our Mishnah is referring to. Hainu, that's what our Mishnah means when it says keharar hatziluim b'se'ara. Says the Gemara, that's not an acceptable answer. That the case we're talking about is where a shaliach sends Me'ilah through where the Baal Habayis sends a shaliach something to do with Me'ilah. Amar Ravu, my kushya. That's not a good argument. That's not what the Mishnah is talking about, because after all, Dilma shiny Me'ilah. Maybe Me'ilah is unique, and we do have shlichus ledvar avera. Maybe we can have a scenario where I could send something that is subject to Me'ilah through a shaliach and have an isser. How so? Diyofa chet chet mitruma. We have a gzera shava from truma, and what's the gzera shava? Ma hasam shlucho shel adam kamoso. Just like when it comes to truma, even if something inappropriate happened, the halacha is shlucho shel adam kamoso. Afkan, maybe the same would be true by Me'ilah. That's shlucho shel adam kamoso. And if that's true, that's a gzera shava. That's michtav ksiva. That means that idea is not a chiddush idea. It can't be what the Mishnah is referring to when it says that it's kehararim hatzulim b'se'ara. So therefore, the Gemara switches to answer number 2 3/4 of the way down, 15 lines from the bottom. El Amar Rava, and I'll just share with you now. We're going to go through a few answers. This answer is going to come back a little bit later in the Gemara. So says the Gemara, what's Rava's opinion? What is the uniqueness of our Mishnah when it references Me'ilah? What is the uniqueness that there's an area of halacha within Me'ilah that is kehararim hatzlim b'se'ar? So says the Gemara, lo nitzracha ela lichedetayim. We have a brisa. Nizkar ba'al habayis v'lo nizkar shliach ma'al. A very uncomfortable din. The din is like this. Let's say that I send an item with a shaliach. Right when he leaves my site, I can no longer reach him. He's gone. He's on the train, whatever the case may be, no cell phones. If I remember, but I didn't have the opportunity to tell the shaliach about the fact that this item was subject to Me'ilah, who gets the isser? So the Gemara says, shliach ma'al. Think about how unfair that is. I'm the guy who did something wrong. I take an item that's kodesh and I say, hey, can you do me a favor? Go sell this in the marketplace and bring me back the cash. So then, oh shoot, I gave it to the shaliach. It's Me'ilah. So says the Gemara, it's not the Baal Habayis' responsibility anymore. It's on the Shaliach. Asks the Gemara, and maybe this is where we get the language from of, oh, poor somebody. Says the Gemara, Shliach Anya, oh, the poor messenger. My Ka'avid. What did he do wrong? As far as he knew, he did exactly what he was supposed to do with an object that was perfectly mutter to do shlichus with. Why is he held accountable? So that's what the chiddush is of our Mishnah, according to Rava. That's the case that's unique. That's the chiddush of our Mishnah that has no psukim that reference it, but the shliach would still taka bi chayev for me'ila, even though he had no idea what was going on. Unbelievable idea. That's very powerful. So says the Gemara, well, you know what? Maybe that is an idea that is explicit in the Torah, because Amar Ravashi, 10 lines from the bottom on Yudam at Beis, Ravashi says, my kushya, that's not really a great case to bring a proof from, that our Mishnah is speaking about this unique case of shlichus, because Dilma midi dehavi amotzi mos hektish l'chulin. Maybe our case of meila is similar to a case where a person takes out money that belongs to hektish and he inadvertently uses them in a deconsecrated way. He takes hektish money and he uses it casually. So there, the halacha is that you're chayev. The Meforshim explain this. You're chayev keren v'chomesh in that case. If you take truma and you misappropriate the truma, you're chayev to pay keren v'chomesh. You're chayev to pay that the keren, the principal, plus 20%. So it's really a quarter, actually. The chomesh is milavar. The math, we've discussed this before. When it says chomesh, it doesn't mean 20% of the 100. It's 1 of 5 units, which is 4 25s plus another quarter. So it's really 1.25. Anyways, the point is that by truma, if a person misappropriates hektish and uses it for chulin, the halacha is that he's chayav for keren v'chomesh. Maybe we should say the same thing by me'ila, and that'll raise mafur shadin and chomesh. And therefore, this cannot be the chiddush of our Mishnah. So therefore, the Gemara goes to answer 3, about 8 lines from the bottom of Yudam at Beis. What's the third answer as to which unique din about me'ila we're learning in our Mishnah when it says that it's keharar matzulim b'sa'ara, that it's as if the halachos are being held up by a thread, a mountain's being held by a thread. Ela amar Ravashi lo nitzrucha ela cheditz, not another din. This din says not al even o korash al hektish. If a person takes a stone or a beam of hektish, harei lo ma'al, just taking it in and of itself, because you haven't used it yet, just taking the rock, taking the beam from the Beis Hamikdash, no me'ila yet. However, nasna lechavero, once I sell it to you or give it to you, then hu ma'al v'chavero lo ma'al. When I take it initially, I haven't used it yet, so that's not me'ila. But when I give it to you, my giving it to you is enough of a shimush that I am therefore held accountable for me'ila. Asks the Gemara, Michti, I don't understand. Mishkal shakla, mali hu umali chavero. Once I take the stuff out of the Beis Hamikdash, who cares if it's in my possession or in someone else's possession? It should still be the same exact me'ila. No different shimush has taken place. I picked up an item that I should not have picked up and I walked out of the Beis Hamikdash with it. Did I do anything wrong? Seemingly not. No me'ila. Oh, I gave it to a friend, me'ila. Ask the Gemara, that's ridiculous. Why? Says the Gemara, you can call it ridiculous all you want, but that's what the Mishnah meant when it referred to me'ila as that which didn't really have any psukim. This is the unique chiddush of the case of me'ila, where a person who takes an item from the Beis Hamikdash has not yet violated me'ila until he gives it to a friend. Says the Gemara, still not a good unique case because umay kusha, you can't use that as a proof. After all, dilma kiddush shmuel. Maybe the case that Mishnah, which refers to when we take a rock or a beam from hektish, maybe that's a different case to Amar Shmuel Hacha. As we turn to the top of Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, the Gizbar Hamisuros Lo Avnei Binyan Askinan. We're talking about the building treasurer. He's the one who has access to all of the materials for the building. And the Kol Hecha de Mancha Birshusa. We already have this din that when a person is the Gizbar, he's the treasurer, we always assume that even if it's in his property, it's still going to be considered like that at the Beis Hamikdash, and no Isser has taken place. And therefore, if that din is already found elsewhere, it can't be what our Mishnah is referring to. And therefore, we move to answer number 4, still asking the same question. What was our Mishnah referring to when it said Me'ilos is something that doesn't have psukim? And answers the Gemara, answer number 4. Ella, really, the answer comes Miseifa. What is the Seifa of that Mishnah, right? That Mishnah which spoke about taking a stone or taking a beam from the Beis Hamikdash, it says, B'na b'soch beisa. You take a beam from the Beis Hamikdash, you know it's going to save you money. If you take that beam and you make it a part of your house, it's a support beam for your second floor, very strong beam. You take it and it's built into your house. Says the Mishnah, Nope. Hareze lo ma'al until what? Ad sheyidur tachteh b'shava pruta. Until you live there for what would be a value of a shava pruta, a few pennies. So let's say it's like prorated. So we pay, let's say $2,500, $3,000. Let's do 3,000. The math is easier. You do $3,000 a month in your mortgage. So every day is $100. A shava pruta, let's call it 5 cents. Do the math. It's a minute. I don't know. I didn't do the math. It's not a lot of time. So until you live in the house b'shava pruta, that's once you live in the house that long, then you're chayiv. So says the Gemara, I don't understand what the Mishnah is talking about. Michti. When we analyze the Mishnah, shinu yeshanye, mali daru, mali lo dar. You already made a change. You took the beam from the base of Mikdash and you're supporting your whole second floor. Construction is over. You're about to move in. Oh, we have to wait till you move in. You already made a change with it. Why are you saying there's no me'ilah? So says the Gemara, this is the unique din of the Mishnah. That when it says that me'ilah is tzulian, is like it's tzulian b'sar, haram tzulian b'sar, that it's like hanging by a thread. This din is hanging by a thread. It's such a chiddush. It's so unique. You already built it. And you're not even chayiv me'ilah yet. Oh, hareza chiddush al Mishnah saying that that's the chiddush. Says the Gemara, no, that's not a good raya. My kushya, I can show you why that's not necessarily true. Because maybe, says the Gemara, dilma kidirav. Maybe our understanding of this Mishnah, where we built this beam into our house, is like Rav. To Amar Rav, you didn't actually build it in. What did you do with it? Kikon shinicha al pi aruba. You put it at the top of your aruba, the top of the skylight that's in your house. Idarbe in. Then only if you use the house, and now you're actually using the beam by benefiting from it. It's not built into the building, but it's kind of blocking the skylight. Fine. That's when you're going to be chayiv and milah. Lo darbe lo. Then if that's the case, says the Gemara, that if you don't live in the house, that you're not going to be chayiv. So now we really don't yet have a case of a chiddush of our Mishnah as to what our Mishnah was referring to. Ella, therefore, the Gemara goes back to Rava. Our answer number 2 says the Gemara, Ella la'olam kid Rava. Really, it's like Rava. Rava was of the opinion about that very unique case that where I am the balabayis, and I give you an item, and now you're out of sight, and then I remember that it's me'ilah. Remember case 2, that's what we discussed earlier. Answer number 2, we said that the shliach is going to be chayiv. And we had asked on that, well, that's not such a chiddush, because we know that by hektish that's brought into chulin that you're still chayiv to pay karen v'chomesh. That was a question we asked against Rava. How do we remove that question? So says the Gemara, Hasam, over there, the reason why we say that you're going to be chayiv when it comes to the truma, no matter what, even if it's b'shogeg, why are you still chayiv karen v'chomesh? Why are you going to be punished by the truma? That's because Hasam made the yada, the ikazuze, the hektish. Pay attention. These are your finances. You should know what truma is. You made a big mistake. Yes, you're held accountable. And therefore, you should have looked better. But hacha mi yada. Here, how could the guy have known? How could he have known? And therefore, that is taka the case of hainu ki haror matulim bisara, end of sugya. So we started with our the first sugya of the day is about me'ilah. Our Mishnah had said that there's something super unique about me'ilah, and there aren't any psukim. Asks the Gemara, there's psukim about me'ilah all over Shas. What are you talking about? So the Gemara responds after a lengthy dialogue that the real uniqueness was this case of Rava. And again, the case is if I'm the balabais and I give you an item with well-intended, I gave you an item that I thought was a regular item. The second you walk out of my presence, I'm like, I gave my shliach me'ilah. Oh, the shliach is chayiv. The shliach, the messenger is chayiv, an unbelievable idea about me'ilah. It says the Gemara, that's the chiddush of our Mishnah. That in that case, even though it's not svaradik, even though it's not logical, even though we could argue with it, the ma'aseh the din is that way, that if I unintentionally give you an item as my shliach and you deliver it, and I remember before you deliver that it's actually me'ilah, you're chayiv. And that's mashma from our Mishnah, sugya number 1. That brings us to a quarter of the way down Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Our Mishnah had said, Mikra muat behalachos merubos. Our Mishnah had said in regards to Shabbos, in regards to the Chagigah, and in regards to Me'ilah, that there are very few psukim and a lot of halachos. Says the Gemara, let's talk about different areas of halacha and see if they're similar. Tana negoim ve'oholos, when it comes to negoim, right, so ras and these types of lesions, ve'oholos, and tuma that relates to an ohel. So there too, mikra muat behalachos merubos, very similar to what our Mishnah said about Shabbos, Chagigah, and Me'ilah. So says the Gemara, negoim mikra muat? Take a look in Chumash. Sapachas, Baheres, Adamdam, all these words we know a lot of words, and we're Amaratzim Doraisa. Leisman de Polig. If we know that there are psukim and chumash about this, that means there's a lot of psukim about this. So it says the Gemara, how can you say Nagaim are mikra muad, Nagaim mikra merumahu? Everybody knows that there's psukim and chumash about this. So therefore, says the Gemara, what then is meant when the Gemara speaks about mikra muad? Amar Papa Hachi Kamar. I was just wrong. That's what the Gemara says. I'm just wrong. Negai mikra meruba v'halachos mu'atos. When it comes to Negaim, we reverse the language of the Brisa that we started this section with. When it comes to Negaim, it's the opposite. We have mikra meruba. We have a lot of psukim in Chumash v'halachos mu'atos. Really, most of the dinim of Negaim are covered in Chumash. Okay, there are some extra things you got to learn, but really, most of the dinim of Negaim are covered in Chumash. And ahalos mikra mu'at v'halachos murubas, and ahalos remains the same as we began this part of the sugya, that there aren't a lot of psukim, and the halachos are many. So says the Gemara, my nafkamina, who cares? Okay, good, whatever it is. Who cares how many psukim there are? So says the Gemara, the nafkamina is where you look for an answer. If you're not sure what the halacha is when it comes to Negaim, where should you look? In Shulchan Aruch? No, go pick up a Chumash. Most of the halachas are in Chumash. Ayin b'kroi. All you have to do is look in the psukim. However, but when it comes to the din of ohel and tumas ohel, and we've learned a lot about this, we know that the top of the tefach, the top of the ohel has to be at least a tefach. Not everything works. We spoke about trees. Okay, fine. All the different beds. Says the Gemara, if you're not sure about that, then ayin b'masnisin. Then the psukim are insufficient. Then you have to go to the Mishnayos. And in our parlance, we'd say, let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Let's go to Ask a Shaila. Let's look in the poskim. That's really what needs to be. And that's why it's important to make a distinction. Next, third of the way down, almost halfway down, Dinin. What about Dinin? So there, our Mishnah had said about Dinin, if we look back in the Mishnah, on Yudam and Aleph, what did it say about Dinin? The halacha, the Mishnah writes that Yesh lahem al mashi yismechu behein hein guvei Torah. So it says the Gemara, Yesh lahem al mashi yismechu implies that there really isn't a lot going on in Chumash. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Michtav ksivan, there are plenty of halachos about Dinin and Chumash. So therefore, it says the Gemara, lo nitzrecha ela lecha de Rebbe. The only reason why this case is mentioned in our Mishnah on Daf Yomi and Aleph was to teach us about a case that Rebbe referenced in a brisa. Titania, Rebbe Omer, in quoting the pasuk, Rebbe says, "Nefesh tachas nefesh," that a soul will replace a soul, and that din is only about mammon. We don't kill quid pro quo. That's not what we do. We do have capital punishment, and people do die when you kill, but it's not nefesh tachas nefesh here, like with balabatim. You have to go to Bezdin, there have to be Eidim, there have to be Asra, whatever. It's a whole process of making sure, Drish of the Chakira, we have to make sure that the person's really chayiv, and then he's killed in a very specific way. But it's not the Wild West where you're just a gunslinging murderer. That doesn't happen. We do have one din like that in Chumash, which is the Goel Hadam. That if a person kills b'shogeg, so then technically speaking, not nowadays with Dina de Malchus Adina, and we have no Ari Miklat now anyways, but technically speaking, in the times of Ari Miklat, if a person would inadvertently kill, the halacha is that they could then kill, the family members of the mace could kill the person who killed b'shogeg unless they're in an Ir Miklat. Fine. That's not this. We're talking about regular dinim here. So says the Brisa, wait a minute. Ata Omer, you say mamon. You say that nefesh tachas nefesh means money. O einu element nefesh mamish, maybe it is the Wild West and we can kill. Says the Gemara, can't be. Amar Nesina Lamata, but Amar Nesina Lamala. There's two references of the word Nesina, one above and one below, referencing places in Chumash, Malahal and Mammon, Afkan Mammon, and both of them are talking about Mammon, Agzer Shalom. If you want to know what the two cases are, take a look at the side of the psukim. The first Nesina is talking about being Mason Yihyeh, Benasata Nefesh Tachas Nefesh, and the next pasuk says V'chinatzu Anashim Nagafu Isha Harav Yatzu Yeladeha Lo Yihyeh Ason Anoshi Anesh Kasher Yashis Alav Baal HaIshav Asan Biflilim. He has to give money in court. So in that latter case, he has to give in court. And even if somebody dies, that would be the same consequence. That brings us to the next two dots about avodos. And again, our Mishnah and Yudam and Aleph spoke about avodos in the same way that it spoke about dinim. We were speaking about korbanos, where yesh lahen al mashi yismechu. And this for sure, we all know that Sefer Vayikra is filled with halachos about korbanos. It says the Gemara, the same question has been asking regularly throughout. Michtav ksiban, there's a lot of psukim about korbanos. So it says the Gemara, lo nitzrucha elo leholachas adam. Here we're only talking about the holachas adam, the actual moving of the blood. We know that shchita has 4 steps. It's shchita, kabbalah, holacha, zrika. The shchita is the slaughtering. The kabbalah is catching the blood, which is the blood of the dam tamsis, the blood that actually is the life blood, the first gush of blood that comes out. The holacha is taking it from where you've collected it to the place that it needs to be poured to, where the zrika takes place, and then the zrika takes place. So what is the unique halacha that applies by holachas adam? What is the halacha? So it says the Gemara, Titania. The pasuk says, V'hi krivu, Zo Kabbalah Sadam. The pasuk says V'hikrivu, and you shall sacrifice, and that refers to Kabbalah Sadam. Why does the word Karav mean Halacha Sadam? Aren't those different steps? Isn't shchita the hakrava? So look at Chumash. The Chumash is very interesting here. I'm sure I've missed this 1,000 times. Look at the pasuk on the side. The pasuk says, follow along. V'shachates ben habakar lifnei Hashem. You should shech the animal. What's the next word? V'hikrivu. What is v'hikrivu? When you already did the shchita. So obviously, says the Gemara, zu kabbalah sadam. That's the next step. After shchita is kabbalah sadam. So that's what the Gemara means. V'hikrivu zu kabbalah sadam. The afka rachmana b'lashon halacha, and it was expressed this way in regards to halacha. How so? Dichsiv v'hikriv hakohen es hakol v'hiktir hamizbecha. That he should sacrifice. The kohen should sacrifice hakol v'hiktir hamizbecha, and then he should pour it onto the mizbeach. This means that we should be carrying the avarim to the kevesh. The meimra de holacha lo tafka michlal kabbalah. The halachos of holacha of moving the blood have to be similar to that of the kabbalah sadam, such that, for example, it has to be b'chli shares, it has to be with the kohen. Whatever the halachos are in one, the halachos are in the other. This idea is not very, very clear, and therefore that's why the Gemara says that the Mishnah included the case of avodos of korban. That even though many of the halachos are present, but there's a subtlety in regards to halacha and kabbalah, these two middle steps of hakrava, of shchita, that we needed to clarify. Next, what about taharos? So that's what the Mishnah had said on Yud Amud Aleph. The Mishnah we're focusing on, that taharos, the halacha of becoming pure and keeping things pure, that those are things that are yesh lehan amashi yismuchu, but not a lot of psukim. Says the Gemara, not true. Michtav ksiva. The Gemara says there is one thing that's not referenced in Torah, and it's one thing that has dinei deoraisa implications. What's that? Really, the one thing that we're missing in the world of taharos is the shiur of a mikvah. That's a big problem. If a woman is a nida, if a man is a zav, whatever the case may be, if a person has to go to the mikvah for halachic purposes, so then if the mikvah is not big enough, she'll be a nida forever. It'll never go away. Nida status never goes away without a mikvah and waiting Sheva Nikim. End of conversation. You live in a place where there's no water, there's no mikvah. I'm really sorry. It's an iser doraisa chiyuv kares to have tashmish amita. That mikvah has to be the right size. Yet nowhere in Chumash does it say what the shiur is. So says the Gemara as follows. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, V'rachatz b'mayim, you should wash yourself in water. V'mei mikvah eskol b'saro, you should wash yourself in mei mikvah, in water that is collected in a mikvah, your whole body. Mayim shekol gufo ole bahen. It has to be the amount of water that covers your whole body. V'kamahen, how much is this water? So the Gemara gives us an answer in cubic volume. Ama al ama berum shalosh amos. It's a depth of 3, and the x and y, the length and width, is 1 and 1. So 3 times 1 times 1 is going to be 3. That means it's 3 cubic amos of water. So an amma is 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. So do the math, whatever it is. It's 1.5 by 1.5 by 4.5. Multiply all of that together, and it would be cubic feet. Then we can have a little bit more of a frame of reference. It's not that much water. It's interesting that the Gemara says v'shiaru, that they estimated, or they gave a shit. It's a math equation. We know what water is. You just have to literally sit there with a pen and say, we need exactly this many cubic amos of water. That's what it would come out to. So 1.5 times 1.5 is 2.25. So I think it's 2.25. And then you multiply that by 4.5 and whatever the number is. Let's call it 10. I don't know, 10 cubic feet of water. That's what it should have been. And this din is not found in Chumash. So because the din is not found in Chumash, so therefore that's what the Mishnah references here when it talks about taharos. How do you become tahor? There's nowhere in Chumash that talks about it. So the Gemara says this is the brisa that we're focused on. What about tameos? You're going to tell me the brisa says tameos. What about becoming tamei? All the halachos there, it's all over Chumash. So it says the Gemara, michtav ksiva. We have so many psukim that talk about tumah. So what's the unique din that our Mishnah on Daf Yomi is teaching us? We know that a person of one of the shmona shratzim, not all shratzim are the ones that are problematic, but there are 8 types of shratzim that can cause tumah. How do we know the minimum amount of that? It's a huge chiddush, and the answer is that it's beche adasha. It's the size of a lentil. It's a very, very small thing. We'll figure out why in a moment. The Tanya, the Brisa says, bahem, when you touch one of them, one of the shmona shratzim, yachol bekula, and maybe you'll say the whole body has to be there. No, Talmud Lomar mehem, it has to be only from them, just a piece of them. Yachol b'miksasan, maybe any part, like any shiur. No, it's not that. It's Talmud Lomar bahem. It says the word bahem again. Ha-ketzad ad sheyika b'miksaso shehu kikulo. You have to touch a small part of the sheretz that is equivalent equivalent to the whole part of the shiur. It's shiaru chachamim b'che'adasha, and the chachamim said is this very small size like a lentil shekin chomet tchilaso b'che'adasha, because a snail, its initial size is b'che'adasha. This din is not found in chumash; it's only found in drasha, and therefore it wasn't found in chumash. So when our Mishnah says tmeos, it's teaching us a special din. It's teaching us this din that a person can become tameh with one of the shmona shratzim b'che'adasha. By the way, this idea of b'che'adasha is subject to a machlokes, as the Gemara says, 2 lines from the bottom on Yud Aleph and Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Yehuda Omer kezanav halata'ah, that we're only talking about it's a larger shiur. It's not b'che'adasha. It's only like the tail of a lizard. That is whatever that shiur is. It's not clear. It's obviously more than that. And Rashi here speaks about this. He says that if you cut the tail, I've never tried this, but if you cut the tail off of a lizard, apparently it moves around a little bit. I don't know. We know that by chickens and animals, if you remove their heads, they will still move around for 60 seconds. It's called pirchus in halacha. So that's the word that Rashi uses, mifarcheses. They tremble. They're moving around a little bit still. The poskim discuss. This is a nafkamina between Jews and Goyim. The poskim discuss what is considered to be the point where Eiver min hachai is no longer shaykh. Is it by shchita? The second the cutting is done, the animal is no longer shaykh by Eiver min hachai, or no, you have to wait till the pirchus stops. This is a machlokes between the Goyim and the Jews. And the Goyim have a leniency. The Goyim are allowed to have no isser of Eiver min hachai from shchita, and Jews have no isser min hachai from after pirchus. That's an interesting nafkamina, and we'll see in a moment that this actually.
No, the opposite. Yeah. That's
the mi'i kamidi. Why does that make sense?
Yeah, that's correct. Brothers are arguing about.
But there is the animal for us.
Right.
What? Say that again?
We have a special din of shchita. Shchita is even though the animal is still moving around, so for them it's something to their life, but because we have a special.
Beautiful. All right, flipped it. So pirchus by a goy, but then there's a chumrah by them.
Correct. Shchita is matir because the Torah tells us shchita is matir.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying. So says the Gemara that we add in this other shita. It's not relevant to our Gemara. Our Gemara was trying to teach us the chiddush of b'che'adasha. But anyways, there's a machlokas about what the minimum shiur is by the shmona shratzim. What about arayos? Arayos is mentioned in the Mishnah in Yud Amud Aleph as well, in this same category of yesh lehen al mashi yismechu. So what's going on with arayos? Everybody knows achar mos kedoshim. I'm saying there's psukim all over Chumash. We read it on Yom Kippur. Nichtav ksivan. There's so many psukim. Says the Gemara. The answer is that there's an awful case. Lo nitzracha. What is the case we're talking about? Top of Yud Aleph on the base. Levito me anusaso de lo ksiva. The daughter, which is the product of a rape. The loksiva, which is not referenced in Chumash, to Amar Rava, Amar Li Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi Asya Heina Heina Asya Zima Zima, that it's only learned out through drasha. It's not learned out from a regular case because it's not a regular scenario. It's not a normal scenario. So the Rishonim here are all over this case. What exactly the details are, we're not going to go into it. But Tosfos here speaks about it. Rashi here speaks about it at significant length for Rashi. It's 4 lines of Rashi, but it's 4 very fat lines of Rashi. So had this been in one narrow column, it would have been half the page. It's a lot of writing. Ayin Sham. It's a lot of work to process this Gemara. But basically, there's something missing in the pasuk. It only speaks about bas bina, not bas bita. So, anyways, that's what this din is talking about, and that was the chiddush case we needed to speak about. So the Gemara, the Mishnah on Yud Amud Aleph that we had started with 2 days ago on Shabbos, where it said Hein Hein Gufei Torah. Why only did this last grouping get the status of Hein Hein Gufei Torah? Arayos and Tmeos and why? What about Shabbos? Why that's earlier in the Mishnah. So says the Gemara, 1 vav was moved. Check this out. Hani in Hanachlo. Only this last section gets the godless title of Hein Hein Gufei Torah. Ella says the Gemara, Ella Ema, what should it say? Hein v'hein Gufei Torah. What does our Mishnah say? V'hein hein. That's what our Mishnah says is v'hein hein. It was a mistake. The vav doesn't go on the first word hein. It's hein v'hein. And if you look back on Yud Amud Aleph, this is a kaftor v'ferach explanation. The end of that Mishnah says that dinim, v'avodos, v'ataros, v'atmes, v'arayos, all these cases that we just discussed, yesh lehen al mashi yismechu, there's something to rely upon. V'hein hein gufei Torah. And it should have been hein v'hein gufei Torah. The vav was moved over one word. We have girsa challenges. They had Girsa challenges. It's not new. This has been going on a long time. And this was caught in the Gemara. And let's just look. It doesn't say which generation caught this, but we know for sure it's Amoraim, probably even Savoraim, which was after the period of Amoraim, because there's no names here. This is an anonymous Gemara. So it's very likely that this piece of history was from about the 700s or 800s when the Savoraim were weaving together the Gemara into the format that we now see as recognizable. Of course, the Balei Tosfos weren't alive yet, and Rashi wasn't alive yet. But for the body of the Gemara, the Savoraim around the year 800 were putting together the text of the Gemara as we know it. And they are the ones who picked up on this mistake that our Mishnah should not have said Vehain Hain, but rather Hain Vehain Gufei Torah. Hadron Allah Hakol Chayev, and Baruch Hashem, we finished the first parak of Chagigah Yiratzon. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. The next Mishnah writes, 6 lines down, Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Ein dorshin be'arayos b'shlosha. We should not be teaching the halachos of arayos in a group of 3. Rashi says that's a Rebbe plus 2 Talmidim. V'lo b'ma'aseh breshis. We should not be focusing on ma'aseh breshis b'shnaim. That's a Rebbe and 1 Talmud. V'lo b'merkava b'yachid. And one should not even learn the merkava on their own. Ela im kain hayachacham u'mevin midaito. Unless he is very wise and he understands from his own knowledge. I'm just going to say that I don't know what these words mean. I can translate the modern Hebrew. There's lots going on here with the language of chacham and mevin midaito. Okay, it's chachma, bina, and das. And I'm just saying I don't know what's going on. There's just a lot happening here. We don't understand the ma'aseh breshis. And then the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, anyone who looks at literally, but it means who analyzes and studies these 4 things, rasui lo, it would have been better for him, ki'ilu lo bala olam. Does anyone know what the word rasui, what the etymology is? I don't think I've ever seen the word before. Rasui, a very strange word. Rashi explains what it means. He says that it means it's better off that you would, that's what Rashi says, rasui hu lo. It's a couple of lines before. So where is it? It's 2/3 of the way down. Rashi says, Tov v'yafe hayalo im lo bala olam. V'omer ani hu lashon. Check this out. Rachmanus. Klomar merucham hu im lo bala olam. Still the language of Rachmanus. There's no mem. There's no ches. Very, very interesting. A unique word. Anyways, the Mishnah says that if anyone looks at these 4 areas of life, then rasui lo ki'ilu lo bala olam. Better for him that he should not have lived. What are they? Mala mala. What is above our universe, or I don't know, we'll see. Malamata, malifnim, umale achor. Again, these are, I presume, terminologies that are picked up by the Kabbalistic literature. V'chol shalochas al kvod kono, and anyone who doesn't have rachmanus on the kavod of Hashem, rasui lo shelo bal olam. He too would have been better off to have never been created. The Gemara picks up on a seeming contradiction in our Mishnah. Amris bereisha v'lo b'merkava b'yachid. First, you said that you can't even learn the merkava alone, and then you qualified and said the hadar amris ela im kein hayachacham umevin midaito. So that's a very interesting question because the Gemara just says it in one sentence. If you look back in the Mishnah, it says v'lo b'merkava b'yachid ela im kein. It's one sentence, right? Don't do it unless. Ainli Ella, right? We have this all the time, but it bothered the Gemara for some reason. I don't know why. And the Gemara therefore pivots and gives us a whole new understanding of our Mishnah. Hachi Kamar, 1/4 of the way down. Ein dorshin be'arayos b'shlosha. I'm sorry, ein dorshin be'arayos li shlosha. You should not teach it to 3 people. You should not teach it unto 3 people. Not 2. You should not teach 3 people. And as well, you should not teach it to 2 people. And you should not teach it to 1. Says the Gemara, that one is not supposed to teach arayos, really, as we saw the taich just now, lishlosha. That's what maybe the Gemara is quoting the Mishnah. The Mishnah said bishlosha, but really the taich that we just learned is that it should be lishlosha. So my taima, ilema. If you want to say that the reason why we can't learn arayos in this type of chabura is mishum dechsiv ish ish al kol she'er b'saro ish ish trei she'er b'saro chad. Right, just diukim from the pasuk as to what it actually means, how many people. That can't be. And and therefore we cannot learn this in a group of 3 or more. Says the Gemara, if that's true, we have the words ish ish all over the Torah. Says the Gemara, ish ish ki yikalel alokav, ish ish asher yitem mizaro lemolech, hachanami. Would we not be able to teach the halachos to less than 3 people? I mean, to more than 3 people, because it says ish ish. Ella hanhu, in all of those cases where it says ish ish mi baile, what do we use the words ish ish to teach us? The Rabbo says hanachem shemuzhar mal birkas Hashem yalavodah zara ki Yisrael. That just like a Jew has these halachos of birkas Hashem and avodah zara, a goya is the same thing. We know, of course, the sheva mitzvos b'nei Noach, aleph beis gimel gimel Dalet Hey Vav. These are the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. The Beis is Birchas Hashem, and the Vav is Ve'avodah Zarah. So if the ish is coming to teach us that, then it can't work for us over here that it's teaching us how many people are allowed to be in the room when you learn about arayos. Even by arayos, when it says ish al kol she'er b'saro, there too is to teach us that there's a din of erva by a goy, that they have to understand that there are isurim in chumash, that they're not allowed to be adulterers. It's not allowed. So that's Gilu Yaras. That's one of the gimels. It's Aleph of the. It's Aleph Beis Gimel Daled Hey Vav. It's Ever Minachai Birkas Hashem Gilu Yarayos and Gezel and Din and Hereg and Avodah Zarah. Those are the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai. It says the Gemara that we expand them to a goy based on the words ish. So if that's true, then how then did we get in our Mishnah to say you can't teach it to 3 or more people? Says the Gemara, first long line. Ella must be midichsi ushmartem es mishmarti ushmartem trei mishmarti chad v'amarachmana levilti asos mechukos atoibos, to teach us that these abominable acts cannot be done. And from the words mishmartim and mishmarti, 2 + 1 is 3. Therefore, you cannot teach it to 3 or more people. Says the Gemara, 3 lines into the wide lines. If that's true, we have the words of ushmartim all over Chumash. Says the Gemara, ushmartim es Shabbos, ushmartim es matzos, ushmartim es mishmeres hektish, as mishmeres hakodesh. Hachanami, would we say in all those cases you're not allowed to teach them to a group of 3 or more? That's ridiculous. We have the word ushmartim all over Shas. What is the reason? What does it mean when I say that we cannot teach to 3 people? In Dorshan b'sisrei arayos b'shlosha. It's not every din in Chumash, only talking about the dinim that are sisarim. So some of the Rishonim here explain that the sisar, let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi's 3 lines into the wide lines. Rashi says in the middle of the line there, Dibra maschel b'sisrei arayos, she'enan mefurashos. Like our case that we saw at the top of the page, okay, these are cases, we'll discuss them more in Yevamos and certainly in Sanhedrin. These are cases that are not mefurash in Chumash. It's very unique, isolated dinim. They cannot be learned when they are not explicitly written in Chumash. And why is that? My time. Why can the Sisarim, the Sisrei Arayos, why can they not be taught on a group of 3 or more? Says the Gemara, because it's a svara. We have a logic. Beitrei, when I only have 2 Talmidim that I'm teaching Arayos, Kiyasve Kame Rabbi, who when they're sitting in front of the Rebbe, Chad Shakil B'Torah B'Hadei Rebbe, one person can be having a dialogue with the Rebbe. The Idach, the other guy who's sitting there, is Matzle Udne L'Gemara. He's turning his ear to learn Torah, so he's not distracted. So I'm speaking one-on-one to one Talmud. Another person comes in, he's just listening to us talk. He's not going to miss anything. He's paying attention. But when there are more people, Tlasa, when there are 3 people in the Chabura, then here's what we're concerned about. Chad Shakil B'Torah B'Hadei Rebbe. So you'll be speaking, if you're the Rebbe, you're speaking to one Talmud, and the 2 of you are having a lengthy dialogue. The Hanach Trey, the other 2 guys who are sitting there who are not part of your conversation, Shaklu B'Tar B'Hadei Adad, Below Yoda, my Kama Rabbihu. They're going to sit there and talk to each other on the side. They're going to make a mistake when it comes to Arayos, and that's an area where we're not allowed to have problems. You cannot paskin wrong in this area. The Asul the Mishra is Surah Be'Arayos, and then they're going to have this whole problem that they're going to make Yisurim Be'Arayos. So says the Gemara, I mean, Ihachi, if that's true, that you're concerned that maybe we'll make a mistake when it comes to Arayos because there's too many people in the room, Kol HaTorah Nami. We have thousands of halachos in Chumash, and you're afraid you're going to make a mistake by Arayos. What about Shabbos? What about Yom Kippur? What about Negoim? What about Tzaras? What about everything? Just because there's 3 people in Arayos, we have so many huge halachos in the Torah only by Arayos. So says the Gemara, getting into the world of psychology, says the Gemara 10 lines from the bottom, Arayos shiny. The world of Arayos are different than other areas of Torah. Why? The masters tell us, the rabbis tell us, Gezel ve'Arayos, when it comes to thievery and when it comes to inappropriate relationships, Nafsho mechamad tanu mis'av elahem. We have a tremendous desire in our nefesh for them. Beautiful yesod from Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal. Rav Moshe Shapiro says there are 2 desires that the human condition has. And the reason that they're so powerful is because they are the only things required for continuity in the world. Intimacy and food. Nothing, money is not required. Everything else is commentary. The human condition has a she'ifa for continuity. Sometimes it comes out poorly and it's manifest poorly because we're undisciplined. That's why we have halacha in these areas ad nauseum. Every din, every shach, every taz. What is yichud? When I was in YU, they asked Rav Meir Tversky, can you go on a date in the car with a girl at night in New York City? Isn't that yichud? You're basically by yourself. You're by yourself. How can you go in a car with a girl at night? So he said you have to keep the visor light on. You have to keep a light on in the car so people can mamish see that you're a yid. They have to be able to see that you're a yid. Otherwise, what kind of yiras shamayim is that? That's yichud. Everything is a din. Everything has halachas. Yeah, libo gaspa, the poskim say, if you work with someone regularly of the opposite gender, even if you're not attracted to the person, doesn't matter. The regular rules of yichud don't apply. When libo gaspa, when you see someone regularly, you have to be even more machmir, even more strict. There's halachos everywhere because it's part of our chemda u'misavelahem. It's part of our wiring. Says the Gemara, if you're going to quote me a brisa that the reason why Arayos was isolated is because of the Yetzer Hara for Arayos, what about Gezel? The whole brisa you just said, Gezel ve'Arayos. Ihachi Gezel nami. How did you leave that out? The brisa only has two things in it. So why isn't that included in our Mishnah? When you say Arayos can't be taught this way, include Gezel. That also has the Yetzer Hara. So then the Gemara splits a hair, and a beautiful one at that. Arayos, when it comes to the world of Arayos, bein b'fanav, bein shelo b'fanav, nafish yitzrei. You could be with a beautiful woman, you could not be with a beautiful woman, and your brain could be going crazy. Totally nuts. That's Yetzer Hara. You don't have to be with a person or near a person to have a machshava. But, says the Gemara, when it comes to Gezel, only b'fun of nafish yitzrei. Only when it's in front of you is there Yetzer Hara, shelo b'fun of lo nafish yitzrei, a beautiful distinction in human psychology. And therefore, Gezel's not included in our Mishnah because the Yetzer Hara is not the same as it is for Arayos. Last sugya for the day, which will bring us to the top of the page. Yeah, we need to, sorry, because the next Amud is pretty long. It says the Gemara, below b'maisa breshis b'shnaim. Our Mishnah said that we cannot learn maisa breshis in a pair. Minani mili, how do we know this is true? A diuk in the pasuk. The Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis teach us in a brisa, ki sha'al na liyamim rishonim. Says the Gemara, sha'al na singular, not sha'alu. Sha'al na, you can only learn it with one other person. Yachid shal ve'en shnaim shalim, not allowed. Yachal yishal adam kodem shenivra ha'olam. Maybe we would think that a person should ask about what was it like before that time, before Brias HaOlam? We're not supposed to ask that. Only from the time that the world was created. Oh, well, the world was created then, but the human beings weren't created till day 6. Because there were no people until then. Leave the first 5 days alone. Says the Gemara, not true. You're allowed to ask even about day 1. Says the Gemara, the 4 things that our Mishnah said you're never allowed to do. Says the Gemara, Talmud Lomar, how do we know those are not allowed to be spoken about? Because the pasuk says, only the limits of shamayim. Very hard to understand what this means in practical terms. Does it mean universe? Does it mean earth? They didn't know about a universe back in the day. I mean, maybe they knew about mazalos to some degree. We know that, but they knew about the Milky Way galaxy. Like, what did they know? I don't know what this means. I have to look in the Meforshim. So that's what the pasuk says in the Miksei Hashamayim ad Kitzei Hashamayim. Miksei Hashamayim ad Kitzei Hashamayim ad Tashol. That you're allowed to ask about anything within the parameters of beginning and end to earth. Those things are not supposed to be spoken about. Says the Gemara. Says if that's true, Hashta denafkale miksei Hashamayim ad Kitzei Hashamayim. Now that we've learned that we're limited from speaking about those things from this pasuk of miksei Hashamayim ad then what does the rest of the pasuk mean? From the day that he was created. Why then do we need multiple psukim? So the Gemara says, Kid Rabbi Elazar. What does Rabbi Elazar say? Rabbi Elazar, Adam Rishon min haaretz ad rakia. It was very tall. He was ad rakia. All of these things have a reference, possibly to physical height, but usually to spiritual grandeur. And we'll see in a moment that actually makes sense. That pasuk, we said that pasuk didn't have use. Now we know what the use is for the pasuk. Once he became sarach, once he made a mistake, once Adam Harishon did the chait, he shortened him. Right? Again, obviously we're not talking about physical height, and we're not talking about literally crushing someone. Presumably not. I presume it's talking about the spiritual lowering of him down to something that's closer to human being, though still his greatness far supersedes ours. So that's what the Gemara says. That beautiful. That he sees. That's exactly right. The pasuk in Chumash indicates the pasuk not in Chumash. Where is this pasuk? It's pasuk in Chumash in Tehillim. The pasuk says that he lowered him down. Amar Yehuda Rab, Adam Rishon Masofa Olam Ad Sofa. He was very wide. Again, it's a similar idea, just in another axis. Shenemar L'minayam Asher Bar Elokim Adam Al Haaretz and Mikseh Shemayim V'Akseh Shemayim. And Kevan Shesarach. Once he did an avera, Yinicha Kadosh Baruch Hu Yadav Alav U'Miyato. Shenemar B'Tashas Alai Kapecha. Says the Gemara Hachi Kashu Krei Hadade. What do we do about contradictions in Pesukim? It seems to be we have one that says that he was tall, one that says he was wide. Says the Gemara, don't ask the wrong questions. And the Gemara responds, Idi B'Idi Chad Shiur. We're really talking about the same exact thing. And don't worry. We'll stop right here at V'amar Rabbi Yehuda. Pick up tomorrow night with Daf Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Yud Beis, not Beis. Beis we did already.